Hi, I'm Rachel, just another overcaffeinated, underrested university student. I study a combination of philosophy and biology, and I'm especially interested in scientific literacy and bioethics, which is why I'm here, to test 23andMe, one of the first direct-to-consumer genetic tests. Genes control a huge percentage of our lives, from our appearance to our susceptibility to certain diseases and conditions. The quest for control of oneself is one I'm familiar with. I became a real adult just over 2 years ago, but I'm curious to try what is touted as being an early method for taking back some control from our genes.
23andMe is a take-home genetic test that allows users to learn about their genetic traits and how they relate to common medical conditions, such as celiac disease, Alzheimer's, and cystic fibrosis. It can also tell you about traits like how you metabolize caffeine and the likelihood of you being lactose intolerant.
I'm taking this test for a number of reasons. I'm curious to see what my results are, but I'm equally interested in seeing if, when push comes to shove, I actually want to know. 23andMe's site warns users that their findings may reveal traits they share with family members, who may prefer not knowing, and that alone raises a ton of ethical questions. Genetic tests like these, while undeniably cool, pose a ton of moral dilemmas we need to take the time to consider before racing headlong into the future.
To get a medical perspective on the 23andMe test, I talked to Andrea Sugar, a genetic counselor at the Hospital for Sick Children, about the potential advantages and drawbacks of a take-home gene test.
So we don't actually offer a test that's exactly equivalent to 23andMe because 23andMe really does carrier testing and risk testing, not necessarily diagnostic testing. The kinds of individuals that we see at the hospital are individuals who are coming forward because they already have an increased risk for some type of medical or genetic condition. And so we're really much more focused on the kind of testing that we do. It might be a specific DNA test for a condition that we're suspecting, or in some cases where a patient's clinical picture, which is called a phenotype, is more broad and we can't pinpoint it, we might even offer something called whole exome sequencing, where we're looking at all of the genes in our genome. But we're not just looking for carrier status, we're trying to seek out a diagnosis. I thought about this a lot. I think that if you're curious about your genetics, I like to call it recreational genetics. There's nothing wrong with trying to find out more about who you are as a person at the genetic level. But I also think that sometimes people don't appreciate the limited value that these results really do have. And I do wonder sometimes if it's a bit of a money grab for these companies. How much information does one really get just to find out that their risk is 20% increased, or they carry a gene for a specific disorder without really having more information. So I think that's one of the issues, and I think the other one is informed consent. I've actually seen some of the websites that offer this testing, and although they do make an effort to try to explain what individuals who are having testing are going to learn, I'm not sure if that can replace an interactive counseling session that really obtains proper informed consent. I'm not sure if people really understand what they're getting themselves into. There's a situation where somebody can have a negative or normal result and get false reassurance that they do not have a risk for any genetic disease or any common disorder. And I also think that we just don't know enough about the variation of our genetic code across ethnicities. And so some SNP patterns or SNP patterns may confer a high risk for a disease in one ethnic population, but not in another. And that really hasn't been worked out yet. And so people may be getting actually false information from this testing. I do try to be really open-minded about all of these tests. At this point in my life, I don't see great value in taking the test. However, having said that, I could see that at certain stages of a person's life, for instance, before they're starting a family, or if they had, a specific family history and they had more concerns, that they may want to uptake this kind of testing. I just think it's really important for people to be aware that this testing doesn't really replace a proper medical genetics assessment for an individual who has a specific concern.
Andrea provided insight on a lot of scientific and ethical concerns about the test, but I also wanted to ask the people whose genes I carry, my parents, how they felt about the test.
Are there historical health issues in your family that you're immediately concerned with?
No, there aren't, and I feel really fortunate for that.
Only recently found out that Parkinson's runs in my family, but since it comes late and you can't really detect it early, not much I can do about it.
Because I don't come from a family that has any big indicators, I probably would not choose to. If I came from a family where there was an indication that there could be a genetic disorder that I could perhaps alleviate with procedure, then yes, I would. But I wouldn't choose to take the test to sit with it like a ticking time bomb waiting.
I think I'd be curious, but I think the temptation is to make you think that you could somehow live your life to prevent what might be genetically inevitable. So again, I'd be tempted to do it, but almost don't want to know the answer.
Do you see like my having taken the test as causing problems or raising previously unworrisome questions about our family's health?
Perhaps naively, no. No, I did not.
Not particularly, not unless it reveals something, you know, that's harmful to you. But other than that, no, I'm fine.
Well, as I mentioned before, I think life is full of maybes and perhaps, and having that sit on your shoulders like a ticking time bomb again, I would be apprehensive of putting myself in that position. I would certainly have to weigh that against any information that it could reveal for me.
I think one of the problems with it is that if you thought that you had a genetic predisposition to something, you might spend a lot of time trying to avoid that which you can't actually avoid. I'd also be a little bit concerned about false positives, as with any test. I'd be a little bit concerned that the test said there's a predisposition to, you know, some horrible degenerative thing, so you spend your life, you know, hiding under the bed, dreading it, when either it wasn't true or you can't do anything to prevent it anyway.
The test involves sending 23andMe a saliva sample and completing a short online profile with your basic information, such as your sex and birthday.
I also found that the website was very hard to navigate. So when I had to kind of like navigate from the link I was emailed to my actual results, it took me a while to figure out what it was that I was actually seeing, and that made me really nervous because I also felt like, I don't know, I consider myself, at least like kind of in layman's terms, pretty scientifically literate, and it was kind of a weird experience feeling like I didn't understand what was going on. And that's another part of the process I really think could be improved.
Ultimately, I wasn't really surprised by my results. Regardless, I remember my heart racing as I checked them for the first time. I think that would have been lessened if I had worked with a genetic counselor or other medical professional throughout the process. The test didn't bring up anything troubling, and so I had no problem sharing my results with my family, but I think that would have been different if the test had found that I was susceptible to Alzheimer's or another serious condition. 23andMe is certainly a cool, fairly inexpensive test to learn about your genes, but it's got a far from perfect score.